Welcome to another enriching episode of the Men After God podcast, the resource for those passionate about leading and growing impactful men's ministries. Today, we'll dive into strategies, share insights, and discuss tools to help you inspire and guide the men in your church and community. Let's embark on this journey together to build stronger ministries and foster authentic brotherhood among men.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Men After God podcast. I hope you had a Merry Christmas, a wonderful time with your family. I hope you didn't spend too much money. I hope you enjoyed whatever ministry events that you had, a candlelight service or cantatas or Christmas plays or nothing, if that's what you chose to do. I just hope you had an awesome Christmas season. Luke, this episode's going out during that week, man. And we've talked about it. It's that week. Christmas is over. The excitement's done. New Year's is coming. But right now it's like, what do I do with my hands?
It's like the no man's land of time. It's like the abyss of we don't know what day it is. We don't know when lunch is. We don't know. We're not thinking about school yet. We're just existing in this state of complete hopeful serenity. If that's you, some of you are in chaos because you're trying to do all the returns at Costco, and if that's you, I'm so sorry. So don't do that. But yeah,
yes. Oh man, it's good to stay diligent, good to stay on top of routines and stuff that you got going. It's also good to rest and just kind of relax. But this week, man, that the guys are listening to this, it's always the one. I remember the first time I heard someone actually talk about it, and he was saying how to maximize this week. And that's kind of what we're going to hit on today. What can this week be used for? I'm sure you've got vacation time. I hope you've taken some. I hope you got some time off, but you may be going to the office too. And if you're like most ministry leaders, you're a guy who's still thinking about the ministry. Mm-hmm. You need to be present with your family. You need to do all this stuff. But it happens, right? We think about it. Now, I'm not telling you to make this intentional time when you're supposed to be with your family. But if you are working, if you are getting into what we're talking about today, I hope this podcast is helpful for you, because we're going to talk about evaluating the ministry impact of the last year and then beginning to look forward to next year as you're going to be entering what is going to be prayerfully an amazing season for you. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. Now, I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to give it back to Luke on this one. We were literally having a conversation prior to recording this about something that I'm looking at it, and I'm just like, dude, I want to do this. I want to do this right now. And But guys that are like me, where you have no fear, and don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't have fear. It's just when it comes to doing what's the word? It's about risk. Risk averse. Is that it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same concept. Is like you're not risk averse, which you're stupid. I mean, so you're I don't know, like something like that. Where it's just
Luke is now going to leave the podcast and get a new job.
Yeah, right. No. Well, I mean, it's the concept of like people that are living in fear. They're afraid of making the move, and then you got people who they're going to wing it, and they're not. They're risk averse is the hesitancy of it versus I am risky. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to take a risk. I'm a daredevil is the word that we're looking for.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. That's my profile, daredevil. And maybe you're like me. Maybe you're daredevil. You can take action. You can make some things happen, and you're going to go and you're going to take action. You might not really think before you leap. Or you may be that entrepreneurial spirit who's going to jump out of the airplane, build a parachute on the way down. Okay, I can very much find myself that way. And when we do, guys, this is what's so important. When we know we're that type of person. I did what I think was one of the wisest things I've ever done, and I don't do it all the time. Plenty of mistakes here, guys. But instead of jumping on what I was thinking about, I brought it up to Luke, because like, Luke, talk to me about this. And I brought it to someone who I know has some more discernment and can talk me through some things. He came up with a great thing. Now, Luke, I think we've talked about this. You're still not like extreme detail or adverse to risk. Like you're all for it, right? Mm-hmm. How do you balance that with? Because you do. You have a great level of discernment there. How do you balance that with making a move versus thinking about it and then making the move?
I really think this passage of scripture in Proverbs really does highlight this. The plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. And I think the short answer is I've made a lot of really, really hasty mistakes that have cost me a lot. They've cost me relationships. They've cost me financial. It's just, so there's a heavy aspect of, I think another verse in the Bible is, seest thou a man that is hasty in his words? There is more hope of a fool than of him. There's a lot of value to urgency and not a lot of value to haste. And there's a difference. Knowing the difference between, hey, we're talking about a business deal that we lose if we wait. There is a no decision is a decision, inaction is an action concept. So understanding there is value there. For me though, I have learned that in a multitude of counselors, there's safety. So there's that aspect of it, of getting wisdom. But for me, it's just really taking that step back and like, okay, if this is from the Lord, then he's going to guide me through it. He's going to provide insight, guidance, wisdom. But sometimes I don't want to listen to God. It's almost like when you go to get counsel on like, hey, here's what we're going to do. And I want your feedback. I want your approval. I don't want your feedback. And I appreciate the fact that like a lot of our conversations, Dustin, it's not a, hey, I need you to affirm what I'm doing anyway. It's a, hey, can you ask me the questions that I am not asking? Because for me, every time I go ask someone that is going to do that, you know what they do? They ask me questions that I didn't ask. And I don't like the questions because they're not affirming what I want to do, but they're so valuable because I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a step back. Is this a good idea? Is it right? Is it best? Is it, God honoring? Is it going to support the end mission, the end goal? And we're going to talk about goals today. There's a lot of things you can do right now that are really, really exciting, but they're not going to feed the goals and what God is calling you to do as a ministry leader or potentially pastor. So that's the concept there is like, hey, take a step back. Sometimes I have the questions, and most of the time I have the people that have the questions, and being willing to have that. Okay. What am I not seeing? What am I missing? What am I not asking? What options have I not considered? What options, what opportunities, what's the purpose of this? To be able to come down to like, okay, now I can make a healthy decision and not a hasty decision.
And that's what this week is great for. An opportunity to pause for a minute, to slow down. Yes, relax. Yes, rest. And evaluate. But don't just evaluate yourself. When you evaluate through your only one lens, you only get one point of view. But bringing others into the conversation, asking your pastor, if you're the men's ministry leader, asking other people in the ministry and seeing what they're saying about what you're seeing. We've talked about data in recent weeks and how to gather data and evaluating it. This week is great for that reflection time frame and also to look forward. Sadly, the Barna Group reported in 2023 that only 30% of church leaders regularly evaluate their program's effectiveness. So that means that there are 70% of church leaders, and this is America, across America, that are not looking at the resources, human resources, the financial resources, the physical resources of their buildings, and evaluating how effective it is being towards what God has called them to do in their community. Luke, do you remember the quote from Maxwell? You're like you guys, if you don't know, Luke on our team, he's like our quote machine. Anytime we're like, Luke, do you know that quote? And he usually knows it. So let's even put him on the spot. It's the one about experience. Experience isn't the best teacher. Evaluated experience is.
Evaluated experience. Yeah, that's you got it. Yep.
Yeah, that's it. So we can look back and say we learned from experience. And while there's truth to that, it's more true that you learn from evaluated experience, right? If you put a fork into the light socket and it shocks you, you would think you would learn from that. But if you don't take a minute and ask the question, why did I get shocked? Then you may be like, well, let's just see what happens again. And you do it again. And so the same is true with this last year. Take this week and look back and asking, hey, what did we do? What happened because of what we did? And that will help you get ready for next year. Yeah, now, getting ready for next year starts with setting goals. And Luke was about to say something, so let me be quiet for a minute.
So before we jump into the goals, I think what Dustin's about to give us is gold if applied and evaluated, and it's a waste of your time if you're not going to. So if you're not going to do what we're talking about today and SMART goals and all that stuff, which we'll get to, then really you can skip to the next episode. I'm sure there'll be something funny and some value there. But if you want to talk about impact and how to look at using reflection to create a projection, right? I'm looking back to look forward. I'm going to learn from the past and grow into the future. while 30%, the stat that Dustin gave, 30% of churches found that only 30%. So 30% of churches, only 30% evaluate, their programs, effectiveness, look at SaaS data, all that stuff, right? Look at this stat. Organizations with a clear vision and goals outperform other organizations by 30%. So while only 30% do, that 30% that actually do have a clear vision and outlined goals and have some metrics in place to help see the progress, outperform other organizations that don't by 30%. So you say, man, I want my church to grow 30%. Well, if you want to outperform the other growing churches by 30%, then this is for you in effectiveness when it comes to ministry. And it can apply across the whole board, but specifically in men's ministry, looking at goals. Why do we do this? Because this is an effective and a stewardship mindset of how am I going to steward the opportunity that God has given me. So real quick, before we jump into this, what is the next episode?
Yeah, that is a great question, Luke. And it is one of our Bible study episodes that this is going to be fun, guys. So as we record these episodes, we kind of do them together. We toss them back and forth. And what's interesting is Luke is going to be leading our episodes for January. And you've been listening to Adrian, our VP of Nonprofit Operations, leading our Bible studies for December. And in planning, he recorded all of them. He recorded 4 out of the 5 because that's all I told him to do. So there's a Bible study episode coming up next week that we're kind of in limbo on. We're going to have to see how that comes together. So I wanted to bring that up. I'm glad Luke brought that up because I wanted to say to you guys, listen, and this is an example. We have to look back and say, okay, how did this happen? How did I miss an episode? And then what can we do about it going forward? And we're going to adjust our system for that to make sure that we don't have this happen again. And so one of the things with Men After God is we're all authentic. I don't want you to think we're perfect. So we're working through it too. All right.
So don't think that. I just want to throw that out there. I don't think if you think that, then you need to go see a doctor. So
we got a lot of issues, right? Yes. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. And so, but yeah, man, I love it. I love it. And so we are going to jump into now going from the evaluation phase. The best things to evaluate is your goals. But if you haven't set any goals, you can still evaluate what you've done. However, we're going to talk about setting goals for the next year. Now, leadership across the board. Anytime you hear someone talk about goals, you're going to hear this acronym, SMART goals. I have heard about SMART goals since 2011. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and I went to my unit, and I walked into my master sergeant's office. He was introducing me to the unit, asking me what I could do, what like my secondary skills were. I was an air traffic controller, but he's like, hey, do you know how to work Excel? Can I give you an answer to anyone in the military, corporate world, and life in general? If someone ever asks you, do you know how to work Excel? Say no. Or at least say, I'm familiar, but I'm not that great with it. Give an answer other than, oh, yeah, I've been using it for years. Because where that led me, I wasn't happy. And so just trying to help you out, okay? But then he starts talking about counseling and different stuff. And he asked me what my SMART goals were, and I looked at him like a deer in the headlights. SMART goals, what are they? SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Let's break those down, Luke. What does it mean to have a specific goal?
Specific is obviously a really, really big word that some of us are going to struggle with, especially if you're from Tennessee. But specific, no, just kidding. Dustin's from Tennessee. Specific is yes, specific. Yeah, specific is a clearly defined goal of what you're going to achieve, accomplish, master. So if you might say, well, I want to learn the piano. Okay, well, some people can learn the piano for a lot of years and still not be great at playing the piano. But you might say, I want to learn the chords of the piano, or I want to learn how to do different aspects, or I want to do it consistently. So my goal would be a consistent goal if I want to practice once every week. Well, if that's what it is, right? So specific can be, the car you want to buy and the number of men you want to be reaching, or the percentage of men in the church you want to be engaging. Mm-hmm. What's a very specific goal? And specific literally means it can't be hazy. It can't be ambiguous. It can't be, I want to effectively, minister to the men in my church. Okay, well, what is that defined by? What does that look like? Like where's don't make it subjective, make it objectively clear by you going specific.
When it's specific, it allows us to not just know it, but allows others to know it as well. That is probably one of the challenges that leaders face, especially early on as they're growing a team and working with others, is they have it clear in their head, but they've not communicated clearly. We said it in a recent episode, one of the greatest failures of communication is to believe something's been communicated. And that happens with goals and vision and what you're doing. Be specific. Don't just say, hey, I'm looking to get more men involved in our men's ministry. How about I want to increase our men's ministry attendance by 20% over the next 6 months? Okay, so that's specific, and that includes all the others as well. The next one in the acronym is M, measurable. Quantify your goal to track your progress. So this is where you use the numbers and milestones. Okay, so this is again goes back. I want to increase our men's ministry attendance by 20% over the next 6 months. I can measure that. I have metrics to go on. So when I get to 6 months and I look at what my attendance was January 1 versus what it is July 1, I can then compare that and say, okay, did we do it? And then we'll talk KPIs later. Were we doing what we needed to do in order to accomplish this? So if they're not measurable, and again, it can go back to, well, I just want to increase our men's ministry attendance at some point in my life. Like, well, that's fantastic, but you need a deadline. It puts pressure on you, and it makes it more capable, more easier to evaluate. Now, Luke, the next one is achievable, a realistic goal. What's that sound like?
Man, this one's harder because we as a company, we set up projections every year. Projections is like our goals where we look at what we've done, what our trends are. And by the way, that's where reflection comes in. If I see a trend, I can track a trend and look at, okay, if I did this, I got this. It's the cause and effect kind of trend and tracking. The problem is that you have two kind of people that are setting goals. You have the person who is the negative Nelly who undermines every goal they set by basically setting it way too low, and then they don't try, and there's nothing exciting and there's no reason to hit that goal, but they'll check it off of a list. And then you have the other person who is, the optimistic, glass overflowing next to a river of water person, which is great, except for they're going to put some unachievable goals that you're never going to get there, and you're going to feel like a failure because you didn't reach what you stated. But that is not because you didn't do the work; it's because ultimately it was impossible. Now I want to make sure it's real clear: with God, all things are possible.
There you go.
I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But there is what time I'm going to commit, and this goes back to the other aspects of it. It does matter, So, for instance, I've watched people who are very unhealthy try to set a goal for themselves, and I think you should set physical goals for yourself that are very specific. So, if you say, "Well, I'm this much weight, and I want to lose this much weight by this time," as we're talking about smart goals, right? Is it achievable? So, if you are 200 pounds, you say, well, I want to lose 100 pounds by the end of the year. Well, first of all, that's unhealthy. So it's not achievable, nor is it wise, because if you're 200 pounds, you want to be 100 pounds, odds are 100 pounds is way less than you should weigh. Also, losing 100 pounds in any area of your life when it comes to physical, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying it's a great goal. But is it achievable? Is it reasonable? Is it something that you're going to get excited about because you'll see the progress and be able to say, man, I got the 20 pounds, or I got the 30 pounds, or maybe it's 15, whatever weight. Now, if you take that over to ministry, okay, well, I want to double my men's ministry. That could be really, really easy if you have one person attending. It could be almost impossible if you have 200. It has to make sense. The attainability, the logic of it matters. So look at hey, what am I doing? What do you think we can do? What would we consider successful? And then map it backwards. We'll talk about that in a moment. So achievable. Yep. Is it there? Is it attainable? Can we get there? And then ultimately, what does relevant mean? So relevant, Dustin, where are we going with that?
Yeah, man, I'll jump right into that as soon as I highlight what you said, but God. Right now, hear me. I understand. I think this is what we feel like we're limiting God if we say we have a church of 125 and I have a men's ministry of 20 and I want to add 5 men, and because then it's like, well, but God could come in. We could add 500 men. Like, I'm not telling you He won't bring 500 men to you. I'm asking you if that's in the realm of possibility. Is it realistic? And that goes back to relevant, right? In a sense. So is it realistic? Is it achievable? There is but God. But you can't plan for God to come in and do something like that. You can pray for, and you can believe by faith God's going to do something. But, I'm sorry. I just don't think we can look at God and say, hey, God, you're going to add 5,000 men to our 125-person church over the next 2 months. No, guys, come on. Let's be real about this. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So is it achievable? Is it realistic? Is it relevant? Okay. So this was part of the conversation Luke and I were having before we got on here about something for Men After God. And if it was relevant to our organization and what we're going to be doing. If you have a men's ministry, and let's say it this way, your church is focused on reaching, your pastor says, hey, for the next 12 months, we are focused on ministering to the homeless in our community. Okay. And again, this is an easy one to go to, but that's what he says. Okay. And then you're setting goals for, not ministering to the homeless in your community, but you're setting goals for increasing the impact at the orphanage 2 towns over. Like, okay, well that's really good. Like, it's not a bad thing, but that's not relevant to your ministry's mission and values. Your pastor should look at you and ask you, like, hey, what homeless in our town? That's what we're doing. Why are you in orphanage 2 towns over, right? And you look at it like, well, but it's a really great thing. It is, but is it relevant to your ministry? Does it really play a part, add value, and help that grow and increase your impact there? And and I'm going to toss it back to Luke on this, but if your men's ministry, let's say again, your goal, your vision for your men's ministry, okay, is limited to discipling men, all right? You don't have a vision of outreach to men for whatever reason, okay, and it's just discipling men, but you plan an outreach event. Now we can make the arguments. I know, but men outreach is part of discipleship and growing. I understand all that. So this is why you want a solid mission vision statement so that you can work all your goals towards that. But you don't want to have goals that are not relevant to what your mission and vision are.
Yeah, I think it's crucial to really, as you're looking at the relevance, understanding that there's a lot of good that's out there. I mean, if we had all the resources, all the money, all the people, we could do a lot of good. We could do great things. But sometimes we're so busy looking at what feels good that we're not focused on what could be great, and we're sacrificing the great on the altar of it's good enough, right? And so I'm gonna really, if you try to catch two rabbits, you're gonna lose both of them. So priorities and the alignment with your leadership in the church, with your team, if you're the pastor, with your pastor, if you're the team, and making sure, like, hey, what is best? And I'm not talking about what's best in your mind. I'm talking about what's best for the glory of God. And so just take that moment as you're setting these ministry goals. A lot of times we look at these churches that focus on the numbers. I know churches that don't count their attendance because they don't want to, God brings the increase. They want to focus on the fact that God brings the increase. And I believe that's true. But I do believe there's context. And if you look at, like, even Jesus talking about building a tower, he's like, for which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and counting the cost, whether you have sufficient enough to finish it. So as we're setting these goals, if I start something and don't finish that, is that going to bring glory to God? Probably not. But if I start something, set a goal, and really take the analyzing what do I need, who do I need, how are we going to do it, and the working together, that's when the relevant becomes very, very real and tangible. And you start to fill up the measure thing on the wall that has a goal of financial, giving or attendance. You say, man, well, we don't want to focus on that because that's the wrong focus. No, the focus is that God gets the glory for whatever happens. Don't miss the fact that people need a scoreboard. It is human nature to want to see where are we going? What are we doing? Why does this matter to me? So that we can better reach men and have better families, better marriages, better whatever. So when it comes to men's ministry relevance.
No, I absolutely love that. And especially, I heard it said best by a pastor out in Arizona. He said, we do track numbers and it's not because numbers are important, but numbers represent souls, and souls are important.
Yeah.
We want to know how we're impacting souls. So guys, remember that. Luke, we could probably count on, I know there's a lot of people out there, but there's probably so few that got into ministry for the purpose of having a big ministry. How many guys surrender their life to Christ and say, I'm surrendering my life to Jesus so that I can have a church of 10,000? Are there guys that are equipped to lead churches of 10,000 or 5,000 or 2,000? Sure. Are there guys best equipped to lead 150 to 300 or 75 or 20? Yeah. But guys, just because you track numbers or someone who tracks numbers, let's not get so high-minded to think that they or we have an issue of trying to just grow our kingdom. Maybe there's actually a heart behind it that says it's so important to me to reach more souls for Christ, I want to track them. So just that's my little 2 cent soapbox moment there. The last part of the acronym is T, time bound. So we are being specific, measurable. We want it achievable and relevant, and then time bound. Why put a date on it? So that you have a deadline and there's a sense of urgency. Now, I'm a guy who can be very impatient. I say it with there's a negative side, but there's a great positive side to it as well. I move with a sense of urgency. I teach my boys as they're getting older. I tell them, hey, walk with purpose. When you walk, man, growing up, all right, I'm going to date myself a little bit here and embarrass myself maybe. I was a huge fan, and I know this is a Christian men's ministry podcast, but I was a huge fan of Eminem. All right. I listened to Eminem growing up, and I would sometimes maybe dress kind of like Eminem in some way or another. I remember 8th, 9th grade, Jinko jeans. Luke, do you remember Jinko jeans? Did you? I don't think you ever wore Jinko jeans.
Just to clarify, I grew up on a farm, and so it's not a fair question. But to our audience, I guarantee someone knows exactly what you're talking
Someone knows
about.
what Jinko jeans are. Okay, well, Luke, I want to help you.
That's what I got.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, okay. Carhartts. Those are things I didn't wear. All right. So Jinko jeans, right? So if you're listening to the podcast, you're really missing a great illustration here. But but if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. So a Jinko jeans, right? So if this were my leg, right? See this, Luke? This pin is my leg. If this were my leg, Jinko jeans came out about this far around my leg, all the way down. Okay. And in fact, we should add a link to Jinko jeans in the show notes so people can find these. Daniel, I want you to do that. And Luke, you need to Google these. You need to see these things. They're amazing. All right. And I hear they're making a comeback, so I'm kind of excited. But nonetheless, Jinko jeans, huge baggy jeans. All right. Grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, big baggy jeans, big shirts, stuff like that. And then the walk. It was that lackadaisical, just move the shoulders, bebopping is what we called it in the Marine Corps. You just bebopping down the street, right? Like one of your bros, just bebopping. Okay. That was how I lived my life at that point. With no purpose, just chilling, just hanging out, right? Now, maybe to a fault sometimes, I can be very purposeful and I want to walk with purpose. I have urgency because I usually have some sort of deadline in my head. Something's got to get done by this point in time. You do that with your SMART goals so that you have a deadline. You have something that's going to pressure you. It's a deadline that makes you stay up overnight to get the project done. It's a deadline that drives you to work hard and diligently after something. Because if there's no deadline, what's the point? Yeah. All the procrastinators in the world would never get anything done if there was no deadline. And whether you're one or not, you're going to work with them. So give them a deadline. We have one on our team. I love him to death. I won't call him out, but he knows who he is. And I put my deadlines for him days before I need it done so that I know it's going to be done days before I need it. And I love him to death, but I've watched him. I have watched him wait until the last minute to do it. And he does great work. But that's how he operates. So SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Luke, you got something on time-bound?
Well, I think it's crucial that there's two things we look at this where we look at one is the time-bound. The cool thing about time-bound goals is that you can have big goals that have big timelines. So you might say, this is my yearly goal. This is my 5-year plan, 10-year, whatever. You can have those. And by the way, we're not mocking God by making a plan and analyzing resources. That is wisdom. That there's wisdom in that. That's being a steward.
Prudence.
But I do want to take it down to the fact that you can have goals that are monthly. So you can take your big goals and you should track them backwards. Say, okay, if I have some big, a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, or a WIG, a wildly important goal, right? There's a different terms for the big, like when I get there, we're going to celebrate. With that, break it down. You eat an elephant one bite at a time. That means I can eat it 1 month at a time or 1 week at a time or maybe a 3-month segment. And you can really get excited about checking these boxes off. So the BHAG is scary. Big, hairy, audacious goal. That's a big thing. But the aspect is, so if you're like, man, I want to start a men's ministry. Well, the men's ministry being an effective ministry of this many 100 people involved or whatever, that might be a real BHAG, right? But starting a men's ministry might be as simple as, hey, we're going to have the first meeting, we're going to have the first activity, I'm going to send out the first survey to analyze the data. Those are small check boxes that show you the progress, so you can reflect and say, okay, we made progress here. what is the next right thing? I'm going to go back to Frozen 2, do the next right thing. Well, it's hard to do the next right thing if you don't know what it is and if you didn't do the first right thing, right? Yep. So just kind of keep that in mind. Secondly, really when you're looking at the SMART goals initiative, all of that's great. Where this lacks, and it's not that it lacks because the plan is great, is what are you going to do when you have achieved that SMART goal? So you set the goal, you made a plan, you did all the stuff we just said, then, okay, where's the reward? Part of the reward is who you become in achieving the goal. Part of the reward may be the actual goal. So if you're like, hey, I'm going to buy this vehicle at this time, I'm going to save it. The car might be the reward. That may be. A lot of our ministry goals they're rewarding in how we're achieving them, but there is no, what is the victory celebration? Where's the victory lap? If we started the men's ministry and got it to be effective and got it engaged and did something, okay, well, what did you do to celebrate that with the team that you're on and the team that you're building? So take a moment to say, okay, when we accomplish this so that this happens, this is what we're going to do to highlight that we can check it off. And for some of us, as simple as checking it off of our checklist is all the reward that we need. For others of us that are more procrastinators, we need somebody else to celebrate with us. So that's
Yes. Man, I have written things down after I have done it just so I could check off that I did it. I am one of those people. Oh, man. A lot of this, guys, the SMART goals, if you're working on your own, you may sit there and think, man, this is a lot of extra work. Okay. If it's just you, I hear you. However, it's accountability for you against yourself. And then for the day when you do have a team you're working with, you're already used to this. This is part of your process and your system. And now you're just bringing them into that. And so it's not something to say like, well, I don't have a team, I shouldn't do this. Yes, you should. And involve your team. Now, if you don't have a team, plan for it. If you have a team, involve them in the goal setting process. And in fact, again, just at the time of this recording, we are coordinating our Men After God meeting for December to be able to do this right here. So I want you to know, we practice what we preach. No, not in a men's ministry setting like you may be in, but in the organization that is helping you develop, revitalize, or grow your men's ministry. We do what we preach. And so we are looking to have this team meeting to have these goals set so everybody can be involved and so everybody can have buy-in. We're holding a planning meeting. You can do the same thing. And it doesn't matter when it is. Man, Luke, New Year's resolutions are coming up. And we've all got them. And you know what people are doing? They've said like, okay, well, my New Year's resolution, I'll start going to the gym and I'll lose 20 pounds. But for the month of December, come on, Christmas cakes. Let's do it. Give me the fruit pies and give me the turkey and the ham and all the carbs. And instead of just saying, hey, I'll just do it now. Yeah. I'll just start going to the gym now. I'll just start watching my diet now. We put off. Some guys say, well, I can't have a strategy meeting for the year unless I do it at the end of the year. I can't have a strategy meeting for the year since the beginning of the year. We can't evaluate 6 months unless it's in June or July. Negative, ghostwriter. The pattern is full on that nonsense. Go ahead and have your planning meeting whenever. You say, I've never done it before. Okay, cool. I want you to go to facebook.com/group/men-after-God. I want you to put in there, I want to have a team planning meeting. I've never done it before. Help. Or you can say, hey, I've held team planning meetings. I want to improve it. Help. And we will respond. We will jump on a conversation with you and help you out with that. Okay. So hold a planning meeting. And then when you get in the planning meeting, you get to do what Luke, I think, loves to do. And that is just share ideas and talk. It's a great time to just brainstorm. Luke, I can see you walking into a meeting and that's what you do. Okay, guys, brainstorming session. 5 minutes, everybody go. And you're just loving it. Is that how you operate when you go into those?
Yeah, we have a leadership term for it. Brainstorming sounds like a waste of time. It's called a mastermind meeting. And so we've rebranded that to sound way more effective. I love idea meetings. And I want to say there's two thoughts in here for the leader. So if you're a leader, you're an effective leader, you have a team of people and you're going to walk into a room and they're used to hearing you talk. And maybe you're the pastor, maybe the assistant pastor, maybe you're a lay staff. But people, when you speak, people listen. If that's you, listen, cue in here. Don't walk into the meeting and tell them what the meeting is going to be and the agenda and the items and your thoughts. Open it up. So like, hey, here's the broad. We're going to brainstorm a men's ministry. Give me some ideas. Then let them talk without you prompting them. Because if you prompt them, you're going to get a glass house feedback, or like the echo chamber, if you would have. They're going to respond to what you cue them. Now, some people are idea people, and they might not need any prompting. Some people are not idea people, but they're initiative people. And if you give them ideas, they'll run with it. Be aware that your voice has a lot of value, right? Secondly, don't be afraid to prompt them. So you say, well, what are you talking about? One is, hey, don't feed them everything without hearing what they have to say, without like really creating that bias. On the flip side, you are the leader. You have ideas. You've seen it happen. You've got some concepts. Those are good. So take what they give, and don't be afraid to look at those. But also, don't be afraid to prompt them. Like, hey, here's a vision. Let me paint a picture for you, because you as leader is the visionary. So when you paint a picture, say, hey, can you imagine that we have a men's ministry where 30 or 40% of the men in our church are engaged consistently and they're serving in this area. And this is where we can recruit our leaders for different ministries. This is where we can feed into our men. Man, then their brains are going to start going, and they're going to see a vision at the end of the goal. They're going to see the SMART goal achieved in your vision and get excited about the process of what it takes to get there. And ultimately, you'll have people to be like, well, if that's where we're going, I can see us starting here and going there. Some people are going to need more, some people need less, but kind of take that into tone as you're walking into that brainstorming session. I love those sessions. I get really excited, but I want to be the one that does all the talking, because that's me. That's not always the best. So read your room, read your team to see, hey, do I need to facilitate more of an open-ended so they can talk? Or do I need to give them, like, here's the vision, and they can help build the vision and be a part of it, the buy-in, like Dustin's talking about.
Oh, I love the read the room comment. That's always fun. We've all been in situations where someone hasn't read the room, Oh man! But when you have those mastermind, my accent just about
mastermind, yeah.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? I was trying to switch from brainstorm to mastermind, and that about happened. All right. So when you have those mastermind meetings, here's one of the problems we can have, especially when we get so excited about what's going on. Because I don't know about you, I'm a passionate guy. When I get behind something, I'm love it. I'm all in. Let's do it. Let's do everything. Everything that needs to be done. Let's do it. Let's do it now. You've got to assign responsibilities to people. So you can have great mastermind meetings, you have great brainstorming sessions, whatever you want to call them, amazing ideas, amazing initiatives that are going to come from it. Hey, we should do this. We should have this event. We should develop this. We should go here. We should do that missions trip and then work in this orphanage. Okay, that's all really cool. Who's making it happen? And it doesn't have to be you. I think, man, and Luke, I am still growing and working in this area to help navigate it. But I think you've said it about me. I'll tell you guys, I'm the guy, like, I don't care who does it as long as it gets done. And if I'm the guy that's not doing it and you need me to do something for you, let me know. Like, I may be the leader of the organization, but you have an initiative you're in charge of and you need my help, but let me do it. What do you need from me? Unless it's an Excel sheet, I'm going to say yes. If it's an Excel sheet, I'll say yes and I'll delegate it again. But nonetheless, don't think you have to do everything. And now if you're a one-man team and you're on this, like, well, I've got to do it. Listen, don't try to do everything a full team would do. I think too many you're comparing yourself. You're trying to accomplish what the men's ministry down the street's doing when they've got 10 different people working on the project, and you've got you and your wife that you've recruited to help you in the men's ministry, right? Don't overwhelm yourself. Delegate based on your strengths. Delegate based on the strengths of the individuals on your team. Assign their responsibilities. Give them the SMART goals. Let them develop them themselves. So make sure there's a deadline, and walk out of that meeting not just with like, man, there's a lot of great ideas shared. Walk out of that meeting with, I love the ideas. I love the direction we're going. I love who's accomplishing what, and I can't wait to see when it gets done because we've assigned responsibilities and done this. And then after you have evaluated what's going on, you have been able to develop your SMART goals, you've included your team, you've assigned your responsibilities, you got all this done. You want to measure your progress. Like Luke said, we can have these WIGs, wildly
important goals.
Yeah, wildly important goals, right? Or your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal. Thanks, Dr. Jerry Falwell, for that one. But what do you do? Eat the elephant one bite at a time. So if you want to see an increase of 20% of men's ministry attendance by 20% in 6 months, that means you're going to break that down into every month. What percentage of increase should I be seeing? Right now, here you may see 0, 0, 12, 5, 2. Right, but then you can again, you're Okay. Am I on track? Am I going to be able to get that 20% increase? Am I doing the things that it takes to make it happen? You do this already. However, you might not have ever heard it called this before. Most people in ministry haven't heard this term. It's KPIs. These are key performance indicators. So you're tracking metrics like attendance, participation rates, volunteer involvement. You could track spiritual growth. You could track a number of different things. And it's called a KPI. And so if you're working with people either from the corporate world or around that, you use that term, they're going to know what it is. In ministry, I think we need to make it more of a common term. But you set KPIs and see if you're tracking against them. And then that is usually for the quantitative type goals that you have. 20% increase, looking to see giving do this, looking to have this many people. But then there's the qualitative goals. And this is more of the human element. Luke, what are a couple ways that we can get the qualitative information from people to evaluate how we're doing?
Yeah, a KPI is something you can track on a spreadsheet pretty easily. You just see like, hey, there's a number, there's a bump, and if you're into spreadsheets, I love the fact that reporting gets given to me in most scenarios, and I can see trends. I didn't prep it, but I get to read it, right? Surveys and feedback forms, probably one of the most impactful, other than a one-on-one conversation with everybody that's engaged. A survey or a feedback form is crucial. Now, I'm gonna commercialize it for a second. What in the world of business, you make a transaction, you make a purchase online or otherwise. You go to Amazon, you go buy anything at the store, and a few minutes later, you get a survey request. How do we do? What can we improve on? That kind of thing. And we're used to that. And you almost get this survey fatigue kind of thing. Like everybody wants feedback. That's because everybody wants to make adjustments based on the feedback, and they need the feedback to make the adjustments. So this is your opportunity to say, hey, it's almost like you have KPI as a key performance indicator. Your surveys is your SPI, your survey performance indicator, or your spiritual performance indicator. What's the engagement? What's the heart? And your questions can be catered to, what am I looking for? Hey, was this engaging? Was it relevant? What could we do better? What did we do really well? What did you enjoy the most? What did you enjoy the least? Now, you don't need to have all those on one survey, but if you just create a survey where it's a consistent feedback loop, so I'm doing a little bit, I'm learning a little bit, I'm changing it, and I'm doing a little bit more, this is crucial. So then, and ultimately, there's ways that you can track this. So, and I'm not suggesting you take a bunch of feedback cards and put them on your desk and kind of sort through them and then be done with them. No. Put the qualitative aspect of it is I'm putting them in buckets like, okay, these ones are not happy. These ones are happy. These ones very, very meh, whatever. And that'd be like NPS type. If you're in customer service marketing, I'm looking for like, who are my promoters? Who are the people that are so engaged and excited? I want to give them more so that they can promote it more. I want to deal with the ones that are very, very negative Nelly-ish because I need that feedback so I can make adjustments because maybe they have really, really valuable feedback. Maybe they need an attitude adjustment and I need to go pray with them and they need to get with Jesus. That might be, I don't know. But like look at the feedback and see what is actionable and what are the trends. A KPI is a real clear trend because 23 people showed up, what are the percentage, number, engagement, whatever it is. Those are numbers don't lie. Yep. The surveys and feedback forms are different because you can look at that data from a dozen different angles. What is actionable? And you can get what does this mean to me? What does this mean to the initiative, to the goal, and go from there. Thoughts on that, Dustin? I want to make sure I don't miss anything there.
No, man, no, you're nailing it. You're nailing it, bro. And then I love what you said of do a little bit, evaluate a little bit, adjust a little bit. Because guys, if you go 6 months, or again, if you're leading a team, and again, this is not so much just the ministry you have, but the team you have, you hear about annual evaluations or things of that nature. I love the concept from the book 1 Minute Manager. Fantastic book. I highly recommend that. But it goes back to what Luke was saying. Like I wouldn't go more than a month without evaluating some things. And you don't have to evaluate everything on a monthly basis. Or maybe it's a quarterly, that's fine. But whatever you're focusing on for that time period, just evaluate the one, maybe two things, but don't overwhelm yourself trying to evaluate every aspect of your ministry and trying to make adjustments everywhere. Make one adjustment in one area and see what the impact is. If you make too many adjustments in too many areas, you'll see changes, but you won't know what they were attributed to. And that's a problem. So, and don't think you got to have any fancy tools for this. You can use Excel, you can use your church management software, Planning Center or something like that. Google Forms is another great way to get feedback. And then again, if you're like, man, I don't even know what questions to ask us. Reach out, facebook.com/group/Men After God podcast. I'm not podcast, sorry, just Men After God. And go ahead and get in there and ask us, and we'll help you. He mentioned the what'd you say? The SPI, spiritual performance indicator, I think is what you said.
I just made that up. Just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
That's not something that's Googleable.
That is now trademarked, copywritten to Luke Johnson.
Right. That's the ongoing joke.
That's an inside joke, guys. We'll let you in on another day. But that is attributed to Luke there. And that's true, though. The KPIs are important for us. But again, the numbers represent souls. So how are we doing spiritually? Can I give you an area that I think would be so important for you to start tracking? What's the divorce rate of the men who are involved in your men's ministry? Can you find some way to point to the relationship and the strength of relationship between fathers and sons for men who are actively involved in your men's ministry? See, that's the impact we all want to have. Like I've never met anyone who stood up and said, I want my impact to be more men in the men's ministry. We want our men's ministry to impact men so that they grow closer to Jesus. They lead their wives better. They love and lead their children better. That's what we want. But at no point are we putting anything down to track or to see how we're doing. Maybe that's why only 70% of churches in America have thriving men's ministry, because nobody's actually tracking the important things. Right. Ways that you can track this. You have a discipleship pathway. How are they tracking through that? That's fine. That's a good thing. But Luke and I were having a great discussion earlier about discipleship programs. Too often it turns into a transfer of information rather than the development of a relationship and the transformation of a life. And remember, as you're developing people, you're not trying to make them perfect. You can't make them perfect. But you want them and you to understand progress over perfection. Are you making progress? Because you're not going to be perfect. So might as well make some progress, right? So discipleship programs, mentorship programs, and then a spiritual health assessment. What if you sent something out to your guys every 3 months, 10 questions that just evaluated their use of spiritual disciplines, right? How are their prayer, their Bible study, their fasting, their giving, their fellowship, things like that, their service. What if you just put scale, use a Likert scale, okay? Fancy word there, but scale of 1 to 5, where are you at? And that'll give you some insight as to where there are. That'll give you some insight what to focus on the next 3 to 6 months, and then send it out again and see if there's been any improvement.
Yeah. I would look at this in a way. There's a couple ways to look at any version of a survey, and I come at this. I'm normally not an expert in anything. I'm barely a jack of all trades, but I do know surveys. So I've worked in customer service in a large organization for a time here, and so I want to highlight this. A lot of times your surveys are so pointed that someone who's getting it is like, you got to enter their name and their email, and you're gathering information. If that's the point of your surveys, to get people to participate and you can use that as a funnel to get their information, that's one thing. We'll be real careful here. If you want to really get the spiritual analysis of where any ministry is, but where your men are at, it needs to be anonymous. So they need to have a way. Now there are surveys that are not anonymous, and that's fine because you're going to hear the feedback. But with open-ended surveys where I'm getting a pulse on where the men are at in my ministry. Hey, tell me what are you looking at? Like where's your struggle? Hey, what's on your screen? How many days are you reading the Bible a week? How much time are you spending? Those are personal questions that not everybody's going to feel comfortable answering, because you might not be compiling the data. And if it's your church receptionist, well, Joe doesn't want your church receptionist knowing that he's struggling with pornography. And being real, guys. So if we're looking at like, hey, and you might say, hey, who'd be interested in an accountability software for their cell phones, or accountability partner for the content they're consuming, or whatever. You say, man, that went way dark. Because I need to make sure we understand the purpose is men that are walking with Jesus and fellowship with Jesus. That's only going to happen when we have real, raw conversations. So just kind of take that and take it for what it's worth.
And that's why we look at the spiritual growth things rather than just the KPIs, because what Luke's mentioning there, statistics are outrageous on this. I think it's 40 to 60 somewhere. I know it's a wide range, but it's huge about the number of men who who regularly attend church and actively use pornography. So don't think these things aren't happening. I don't care how conservative is, what everybody's wearing, or how amazing your church is, everything going on. That particular sin, that is rampant. Okay. And then there's others that they're dealing with too. Okay. So those are things that you can have a survey, especially an anonymous one, help you know, what do I need to address here? Can you call Covenant Eyes and maybe get a discount for Men at your church? I mean, there's a number of things that you can do there. Maybe Men After God needs to call Covenant Eyes, see what we can do. Anyways. All right, guys, let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. So whenever you do these things, you want to make sure that they are holding you accountable to what God's called you to do. That's why we have the goals. That's why we have the KPIs, the SPIs, and things of that nature. So you check in regularly with your team, check in regularly with the ones that you're leading, and to get that feedback, okay? And then you're reporting. Your pastor needs to be aware of the state of the men in his ministry. And so sharing this with him and making sure anyone knows that any information gathered is shared with the pastor, that's very important. But don't put yourself in a silo and think like, oh, well, this is just between me and the men. No, you just became the pastor of the church is what you just did. And so you share it with your pastor and you let him minister to the men God's given to him and his flock, and utilize you as another shepherd that's there as well. And then adjust. Be ready to adjust as things come up. And one thing that I'm terrible at, okay? Luke mentioned it. I'm terrible at this because for me, the check in the box is enough for me. I'm good. Right. I'm happy. Celebrate the milestones. Reward the achievements for the men that are in there, and as publicly as you can, with different things going on. And then again, so one way for this that's very public, very easy: honoring anniversaries, celebrating weddings, celebrating kids' birthdays with your men, and just their fatherhood and the next level of fatherhood. Providing resources for that. So many ways that you can celebrate these things. Yeah,
so guys, I'll say that just because it's real quick. This is an easy one. You say, well, I don't want to celebrate a number or a metric. That's not my focus. Celebrate the person who best impacted. Like celebrate the person who collected the data, did the surveys, set up the tables, brought the food. There are people that if you just celebrate them in the process of the celebration, that is enough for people to see, wow, we're doing things. This is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. All right, guys, we went over a lot today, and I hope it's been a blessing to you during this weird week. Right. So action steps: go review the past year, assess what worked and what didn't, set goals for the next year, make sure they're SMART goals, get your team involved, develop an action plan of who's going to do what and when it's going to get done by, and communicate your plan with your team, with your pastor, and your ministry. All right, guys, I hope you had a Merry Christmas. I hope you have a Happy New Year. Enjoy our next episode as we figure out what it's going to be. Have a great weekend, guys.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Men After God podcast. We hope today's discussion has encouraged and equipped you on your journey. We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, or would like to partner with us, please reach out at support@menaftergod.net. Stay connected with our community by liking our Facebook page at facebook.com/menaftergodpodcast. For deeper engagement, join our group at facebook.com/groups/menaftergod and connect with other men pursuing God's heart. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Your feedback helps us reach more men striving to live faithfully. Until next time, stay strong in the faith and continue pursuing after God.